Hello, my noble band of outlaws, Outlaw Samurai, coming at you live with a video. And if you're wondering about that buzzing sound in the background, it's a box fan. Because I do not have AC, and I am fat, and I am sweaty. But nevertheless, today I'm finally going to do the video that I have been trying to do, reviewing, deleting, and then remaking for a while now. Checking the time, okie dokie, don't want to do a lot of rants. And that is, which is better? One sword style or two sword style? Now, I actually do have a script. I know, shocker, right? I made a script. I usually don't do scripted videos, and it's not because I have anything against it. It's just that I really don't like having to sit down, write an entire script out. I'd rather just do the video based on the knowledge I have at hand, but I digress. Enough with the rambling. I will start off with one sword style. So, I will begin with discussing the pros of the one sword style, and then I will go into the cons. You might want to grab a beverage and a snack because this video is probably going to take a while. And yes, this is a design for a sword guard that I drew a year ago. Without further ado, pros of the one sword style. Ease of use. And what I mean by that is it's relatively easy to pick up one sword and use it with some minor instruction. Now, do you have to be a master to pick up a sword and use it? Not really. There are a lot of swords that if you buy them, they will be extremely, sometimes too extremely forgiving when you use them, especially in cutting. The katana is one of these swords. It is a very extremely forgiving sword in the cut, especially if it's forged correctly. The Albion Principe, if we're going to be discussing European swords, compensates for the cutting extremely well because of its flat 18, Type 18C, I believe, blade. So, as I said, the one sword style is easy to use. Easy to learn is a different story, however. As I said before, it's relatively easy to pick up and use a sword with a one sword style, especially in bottle cutting and such and so. But if we're going to get into fighting, which is the main topic of which is better in a fight, that is the consistency of this video, easy to learn is that one sword style is generally very easy to learn, in the sense that you're predominantly going to be wielding the sword with both your hands. And simple cuts like this are quite easy to learn. And honestly, some of the cuts are some of the beginner's cuts that you learn are extremely hard to screw up. For example, a cut like this is extremely easy to screw up, whereas a cut like this is very hard, it's very easy to screw up. And I sound confusing, I meant to say a cut doing this is very hard to screw up to the point where you can't at least halfway cut to a target, whereas a cut like this is much easier to screw up. So as I said, one sword style is relatively easy to learn. Checking the time. Alright. Weight distribution between your two hands. Now this is a biggie in swordsmanship and basically any martial art where you use a weapon. Be it a weapon as simple as a bow staff to a weapon as complex as a halberd. Weight distribution is key. And in one sword style, the weight of a single sword will always be divided between your two hands. So in a sense, the weight of the sword is cut in half between your two hands. When you hold a sword fully in one hand, all the weight of the sword is on that one hand. But as I said, in two hands like this, the weight distribution is basically cut in half. So a 4-pound sword will feel like a 4-pound sword if you hold it in one hand, but if you hold it in two hands, you'll actually feel a little like you'll actually handle more of a 2-pound sword. At least that is my understanding of weight distribution. I could be wrong. You might want to fact check me. So that handles weight distribution. Your attacks are stronger. This is a biggie. And in one sword style, yes, your attacks are stronger because you have two hands on one blade. If I remember correctly, it is your dominant hand that provides the power for the cut, so pushes the blade forward, while your non-dominant hand pulls back. At least that is how you use a two-handed single-edged sword, like a katana. I'm not very accustomed with cutting with European and straight swords in general, mostly because I don't have any straight blades aside from a machete, which is one-handed. But, as I said, your attacks are stronger because you have both your hands on one blade. And with that in mind, it's also actually easier to control your sword with one hand because you are using the entire muscle structure of both your arms to swing around one blade. So you can actually control the sword better, which actually translates into the 6th pro of the one sword style. It is easier to cut with a one sword style than it is with two sword. And this also transfers back to what I was saying about both hands on one blade, weight distribution, because of the fact and power in your cut. It is generally understood that two hands on one sword will give your cuts even more power. And with that in mind, a more powerful cut generally means a cleaner cut. And what I mean by cleaner cut is that generally the more powerful two-handed cut is more controlled and it will still cut cleanly if you have proper edge alignment, but this video is not on edge alignment. I think I have basically covered the first 6. The 7th pro of the one sword style is the transferable techniques. And what I mean by that is, let's say you have a European swordsman and a Japanese practitioner of Kenjutsu. Now, there is a technique that is called, I think it's Wrath Guard, where you stand like so. Take a step forward and deliver a cut. And this was predominantly used for German longsword. But even this technique, this stance, this wrath guard, can be transferred over to the Japanese sword with a technique. I believe this is called Jodai no Kumai, the stance I'm in now, which, if you really think about it, just move your arms a little and you're in German wrath guard. So one sword style techniques can easily be transferred over into another style. This is predominantly guards and stances and such, but the same principle applies. You can transfer over the techniques from another style, so long as they are compatible with the techniques you are wanting to use. That basically covers all the pros of the one sword style. Now for the cons. I tried to think of as many pros and cons of these styles as I could, and usually by the time I hit the 11-minute mark, which is what I'm at now, I've rambled about some crazy thing that I didn't really mean to talk about. But once again, trying to cut my rambling short. The cons of the one sword style: having to choose between defensive and offensive situations. In one sword style, you are trained to basically react to your opponent. Where your opponent is, when he is on the attack, you are on the defense. And when you are on the defense, your opponent on the attack. And you have to choose in between whether you want to push an attack or stay back in the defense. Of course, understanding the best defense is a good offense, but still, you have to choose whether you want to attack your opponent or you want to just simply take a step back and stay on defensive. I find that a con because the way I fight is I very much adopt the samurai's principle of no mind. I am a very instinctual fighter, and I personally don't like to think a lot when I fight. I'd rather just obey my first instinct and follow it. Now, I understand different people fight different means. That's just how I do it. And I find that a con of the one sword style because in the time it takes you to decide what technique you're going to use, your opponent, if he's skilled enough, can score a point on you. So that's why I believe that's a con. Number 2 is difficulty when fighting multiple opponents. This is a biggie of a con in the one sword style, considering the fact that if you have multiple opponents and you only have one weapon to fight them off with, you're always having to take care of one opponent quickly and then move on to your next opponent. Or you're always having to keep dodging for the majority of the fight, wearing down your stamina reserves, and your two opponents can take advantage of that. That is the reason why I believe that is a con of a one sword style, and a lot of you, I believe, would agree with me on that. Third con of the one sword style is predictability of movements. And this is going back to when, this is actually a direct tie-in to the 7th pro of the style, transferable movements. Like I said before, when you're in Yodai no Komai and Wrath Guard, the two stances are very similar, and you can transfer those techniques. But if you are up against an opponent who has studied both HEMA, historical European martial arts, more specifically long sword fencing, or any kind of sword fencing, and you go up against an opponent who has studied Kenjutsu, then you will actually have techniques that can be transferred in between the two fighters. For example, as I said before, Wrath Guard and Yodai no Komai. So predictability in the techniques. Number 4 is I have repeating of techniques, and now that I think about it, that is basically the third, or predictability. That is basically the third con of the style. Well, I believe my phone is starting to fill up on space, so I'm actually going to make this a 2-part video. So those are the pros and cons of the 1-sword and 2-sword style. And those are the pros and cons in my opinion. In the next video, part 2, 1-sword versus 2-sword, I believe I've made a video about this beforehand for this channel, but this is a more in-depth, less rambly version. Well, I'm going to be making the part 2 video after this one. So, until next time, I love Samurai, tells all y'all, be crazy rednecks, be safe when using your weapons, I'm out, peace, happy 4th of July.